things around that. And that's where I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves credit of the energy that you have to do all that, right? In addition to caring for someone with a disease. So Jessica Patay is here today to talk about caregiver burnout, how to avoid it. So she runs a nonprofit called We Are the Brave Together, and it's a very easy website. You log on to it, you can join it, get newsletters, updates. She does podcasts. It's a nonprofit where she's supporting caregiving moms with children of all types of disabilities. In addition, she's a speaker, podcast, writer, and retreat coordinator, fundraiser, mother of 3, social influencer, and champion of self-care practices. And also, I want to point out here, her vision is that every family in the disability community is strengthened, equipped, and inspired for their journey, for their unique journey. So welcome, Jessica. We had some technical challenges. I think are we still having them?
Okay, all right. Hi everyone. There is nothing I like more than being a wife, a mother, and a supporter to caregivers. So I thank you so much for having me today. And I am crazy passionate about talking about preventing caregiver burnout. Years ago, my beloved Grandma Seal gave me my first car when I was 18. Well, actually, she gave me the money. I had a whole $3,000 to find a used, reliable car. This was back in 1988, so it went a little bit further than it does today. And I did find an almost 10-year-old blue Honda Prelude, and it even had a sunroof and stick shift, of course, which does not even exist today. Freedom and independence was just glorious, right? I just love to cruise Pacific Coast Highway. I'm a Southern California native. And the only piece of car advice that I received was from my single mom. And she said, have a Thomas guide in your trunk. I know that dates me. Half of you probably don't even know what that is. And secondly, change the oil every 3,000 miles. Well, less than a year or 2 later, my little car died. So many things went wrong because I had no idea how to be attentive to the needs and the maintenance of an older car. I ruined the wheel hub and I burnt the engine. So, freedom, independence, and cruising all gone. I said goodbye to my little coupe. I obviously wasn't a car expert back then and still not at all. Do you know what happens if the wheel hub is broken? The tire and wheel can literally come off at any speed, and it is incredibly dangerous. Luckily, the climax of my love story is that my car died in front of my house, so I was not driving down the street. But that risk didn't have to be that way. If I had had a little bit of car knowledge, maybe a little more maturity, and a little life experience, I could have paid more attention. And my attention inwards towards what keeps me moving, the self that gets me through everything and anything, is really not a luxury, but a necessity. And it must be maintained for the life of the vehicle. I didn't have a Tesla. Today we're going to talk about the most important hub of your life as a caregiver, and that is the practice of self-compassion. Almost 20 years into being a caregiver to my son Ryan, who has a rare disease called Prader-Willi syndrome, I believe in 3 keys to thriving, not just surviving amidst chronic hardship. Number 1 is practicing self-compassion, which is the hub from which everything else is going to flow. Number 2, connection to self and community. And number 3, soul care practices. Through self-compassion, we become an inner ally instead of an inner enemy. Dr. Kristen Neff said that. She is the guru of self-compassion. She defines self-compassion like this. You are treating yourself as if you would your best friend. Say your best friend is suffering, experiencing failure, having a struggle. You would treat your friend with warmth, validation, care, support, and no judgment, right? So we can turn this on to ourselves. I'm sure this sounds a little bit woo-woo, but I really stand by my convictions. After almost 6 years of leading We Are Brave together, hearing hundreds of mom stories, talking to expert veteran moms, having experts, coaches, therapists on my podcast the last 3 years, I firmly stand in this, that you must take care of your inner lives and your inner selves. In order to withstand the medical storms and mental health storms of life, you must be anchored within, and the practice of self-compassion can do just that. Because if we engage in self-compassion, we will believe that we are worthy of investing it, and not just medically, but investing in our mental health. If we engage in self-compassion, we will treat ourselves with tenderness rather than beating ourselves up about our struggles or our child's struggles. We will acknowledge that we have needs and work to meet those needs. We will invest in our own self-connection. I believe we will practice self-care. I call it soul care. We'll talk about that a little later. We will recognize our need for meaningful and safe connections and seek them out. And we'll recognize that we cannot do this journey alone. And we have to be surrounded by other people who get it. It's critical. Self-compassion reminds us that we are worthy of investing in our own mental health, which is then boosted by connection, community, and soul care practices. I audaciously say that as caregivers, we're the most important person in the family. And we tend to put ourselves last due to cultural indoctrination that we must do and give and not think about ourselves. It is really understandable how this happens. Our kids' crisis requires so much of us. Here's my family. Don't be fooled by the cute picture. It is just crazy town in my house. I have been married to my husband, Chris, for 26 years next week. We have 3 kids, Luke, who's 22, Ryan, who is almost 20, he's my son with Prader-Willi syndrome, and my daughter, Kate, who's 17. So Ryan was born with very, very low muscle tone. So right when he came out, we knew something was wrong. There were some medical issues. He barely cried when he came out, and I thought, well, maybe I got an easy newborn this time after having Luke, who got kicked out of the nursery in the hospital, you know. Very quickly, we learned that there was lots going on with him. He couldn't suck. He didn't cry. In fact, he didn't cry his whole first year. He could barely move. So right away, they started tests. We spent a month in the hospital not knowing what was wrong. And this was before smartphones, so I was not looking anything up because I didn't want to torture myself. But my husband found Prader-Willi syndrome and said, will you test for this? So thankfully, we got an early diagnosis when he was 5 weeks old. He had a feeding tube his first year because it took that long for his mouth and the 1,000 things that go into sucking to really start to work. Now, it's a rare disease, and if you've never heard of it, I am not offended at all. And I always say there's no cocktail party explanation, so I'll do my best. You're born with low muscle tone. So in the early years, you're focused on gross motor, fine motor, speech, milestones. Of course, we were focused on feeding as well in the very, very beginning. And then later on in childhood, this is the piece, the crazy piece that makes the news. There's an insatiable food drive that kicks in. So the brain and the body do not tell Ryan that he's had any food. And that, coupled with underlying obsessiveness and anxiety that are also part of Prader-Willi syndrome, leads to life-threatening food-seeking behavior. Crazy, right? There's medical stuff, there's cognitive stuff, academic stuff, and there's this crazy food drive. So we live with a locked kitchen. We didn't have to lock our kitchen until he was 13, and then by the time he was 16, we had to become vigilant. Like, don't leave it unlocked. He's watching every second. He's watching for someone to get distracted and go to the bathroom, and he's gonna grab something. So there is a vigilance with which I live. I even check the kitchen in the middle of the night because I'm not the last one to go to bed. So it's crazy. And he is a sweetheart, and he is compassionate, and he's my most grateful child. Don't tell Luke and Kate I still say that. He's taught me everything, and I wouldn't be standing here today if it were not for Ryan. There would be no We Are Brave together if it were not for Ryan. So in taking care of Ryan, this is where the perspective of caregiver would typically be placed. However, in recent years, my other two children are also on unique and sometimes worrisome paths, and they equally need the balance of my caregiving in their own personal ways. It was in caring for my youngest, Kate, that really brought me to the deep acceptance that the internal self-care was the priority. When we were in the thick of the pandemic and Kate's mental health struggles came to light, I felt like every inch of my day was filled. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, mentally, just trying to take care of her. It's the pandemic, juggling everybody's needs and work, and I was stretched thin. Have you ever held a balloon that has so much air in it, you think, if I blow on it, it's gonna pop? That is how I felt. That is how I felt. And I felt guilty that I did not see this coming. I'm an involved, attuned parent, and I did not see this coming. The siblings are a topic for another day, but the siblings hide their needs because when there's one child who needs so much time, energy, and attention, the siblings feel like they have to be perfect or not have any needs. Anyway, I was beating myself up, and I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I was just heaping gobs of judgment all over myself. Thankfully, I've been pretty committed to exercise my whole life, but when I was in the middle of this, I wanted to throw it out the window. I was taxed. I was done. I wanted Netflix, sugar, and my purple blanket. My, self-comfort escapes. And then I had compassion on myself, on my fear, on my shame, on my worry, and all my angst. And I spoke kindly to myself in the midst of this. I made myself get out for a walk, or a jog. I made myself journal or meditate, even if it were only 5 minutes. That's all I could spare. I just made myself do it. I made myself do the soul care practices that keep me connected to me, grounded, grateful, and sustain me, truly sustain me for the long haul of caregiving. So let's go back and talk about the feelings that come over us when a diagnosis is delivered or when crisis hits our families. We feel sad, scared, afraid, we do the what ifs, we go through grief, we might start comparing to other families that don't go through any crisis and feel super resentful. And frankly, we might be angry that this is happening to us or happening to our child. All the feelings, right? I'm gonna teach you a new phrase today. It's so understandable. It's so understandable. I learned this phrase from author, therapist, and wisdom teacher Susie Lula, who I studied under. This is what practicing self-compassion sounds like in the middle of crisis. Imagine saying this to yourself, and I know this is gonna sound weird, but just go with me on this. You might even wanna just close your eyes, honestly, and just take this in. It's so understandable to feel all the feelings. It's so understandable to feel sad, then hopeful, then crushed again, then optimistic. It's so understandable to carry fear and worry and wonder how this is going to play out for you, your child, the siblings, your marriage, your career. It's so understandable to compare your crazy life to a neurotypical, healthy, normal family and feel really resentful. It's so understandable to grieve the life that you thought you were going to have, or grieve the life that you thought your child would have. It's so understandable if you feel overwhelmed and exhausted at times. It's so understandable. As I said these statements, what were you feeling in your body? Did anyone exhale a little bit? Did anyone feel a little tension in your body? This is the power of self-compassion. You can say to yourself whatever you are feeling. This is so understandable. Even when the circumstances are not understandable, your feelings are. We are such infinite containers of compassion for our best friends, our family, our loved ones, our children. We can turn this ocean of compassion on ourselves, onto our caregiving lives. So besides the feeling responses that we talked about, what do we generally do when a diagnosis is delivered? We go into mama bear or papa bear or warrior mode. We Google, research, make appointments, find doctors, look for interventions, look for treatments, look for answers, maybe try to find parents or patients who are further along in the journey. We probably also engage in self-comfort, but we're going to put a pin in that and we'll come back to that. So why? Why do we do all the things? Well, obviously we want what's best for ourselves if we are the patient, or what's best for our child, for the parent. But let's go deeper. What are some of our intentions of caregiving busyness and productivity? What are we hoping for? Well, I don't know about you, but I might think if I can do all these steps and interventions, I can help fix a little, be in control, and my child will progress or heal a little bit or hit certain milestones, and he or she will be on a more healthy or more successful path. Yes, we want to do all the things, of course. And yet, I want you to know that your worth as a caregiver is not dependent on how well your child is doing or how well you are coping with this situation. Your worth is not tied to how well your child is doing despite the diagnosis. You don't need to prove your worth, your strength, your bravery by the outcome of your story or your child's story or by how well you are handling this. You have worth simply because you breathe, simply because you exist and you're a beautiful human being. Once we recognize this and really take it in, I think we can pause and assess just how we want to spend our precious energy and our precious time. And not just live on a spin cycle for a diagnosis, but for our families. You are worthy. This is what self-compassion ingrains down to our bones, down to our soul. Years ago, when I first began speaking on self-care for the caregiver, I would give you lists and ideas and bite-sized ideas and free practices and do this, do that. And they were all great practices that do deposit into your mental, physical, emotional health. I would also make sure that I would distinguish between self-comfort and self-care, which I will do because I still think it's really, really important. So self-care practices are things like eating, drinking, shopping, watching something, maybe a spa treatment. There are things that provide relief only in the moment that you are doing those things. They will not sustain you for the long haul. Soul care is what I call self-care because it's a truly deeper way to invest in yourself, in your mental health. And that would be like a gratitude practice, journaling, engaging in some sort of creative expression that just helps you access joy or peace, exercise, yoga, meditation, prayer, time with a life-giving friend who validates you and validates your journey. Self-comfort is escapism, but soul care is a true investment. So fast forward to more recent talks, I'm going to first and foremost talk about self-compassion. Why? Because if you are offering yourself compassion, you will believe that you are worthy of investing Self-compassion will remind you that you are the most important person. You need to invest in your own mental health. I know you all give meticulous medical care to your children or to yourself if you're the patient, and you deserve meticulous mental health care and attention. If you don't believe that, it doesn't matter if I give you the best, prettiest, laminated list of self-care, soul-care ideas, because you have to believe that you are worthy of investing in. If you are offering your self-compassion, you will recognize that you have needs. Self-compassion means pausing, acknowledging that we have needs and we're responsible for advocating for our own needs and getting those needs met. Traditionally, women or moms, and sometimes dads can fall into this too, tend to be people pleasers. And people pleasers believe that if their needs conflict with the needs of somebody else's, their needs don't matter. Add to that the indoctrination of martyr motherhood and concierge parenting, and it's just a recipe for a total crash. Let me tell you a story. So I practice yoga. I've been practicing for years, and when the studios started to open up in the middle of the pandemic and I could start practicing again, I found an early morning class that I loved, and it works well with working, right? Now, Ryan, my son with PWS, he wants me to be the only one to do that morning routine every morning. He didn't like my husband stepping in. I have a wonderful husband. He's a hands-on husband. We're kind of seamless. We don't do things that different. But Ryan was protesting. And, this was, a couple years ago. He's 19, almost 20. He was 17, almost 18. Tantrums, meltdowns, major anxiety. The night before, 2 nights before, the morning of, giving my husband complete grief. Ryan's need for me to be the only person to do his morning routine was high. That was his need. Well, I had a need to go to yoga because it keeps me grounded and it keeps me grateful and I can sweat out my stress. It would have been easy for me to cave. My husband said, "You're not caving," so kudos to the husband. "You're not caving, I got it, just go. Okay. Guess how long we endured this with Ryan? 3 months. 3 months. And then it subsided. I knew that my need to get to yoga was more important than his need for me to do his morning routine. I do it 5 other days a week. He can adjust. Say this with me. This is an interactive part, okay? I want you to say this with me. I am a human being.
I am a human being.
Therefore, I have needs.
Therefore, I have needs.
It is my job to understand my needs.
It is my job to understand my needs.
Speak aloud my needs.
Speak aloud my needs.
And get my needs met.
And get my needs met.
No one will do this for me.
No one will do this for me.
Okay, thank you. So it is our joy and responsibility as a human being to get our needs met. We may have shoved them down. I've heard this because I talk to moms every day for the last, 6 years. You might not know what the needs are. You might shove them so far down into the sand that you have no idea. You're just like, I don't know. I don't know what I need. But today's a new day, and you can get a new shovel and a bucket, and you can dig them out. I can help you. I believe if you're offering yourself compassion, that you won't let pride or fear stop you from seeking connection and community. And I say connection and community safely. This is why I started Year Break Together. So when Ryan was diagnosed at 5 weeks of age, my husband reached out to a few organizations. Within a few days, I got the Lisa phone call, I affectionately call it. Lisa called to say, "Hi, I'm going to be your mentor mom. My son is 5 years older than Ryan. By the way," she also said, "Congratulations on the birth of your new boy," which everyone else had been saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And so that was the most beautiful thing to remind us. Oh yeah, baby. Anyways, so right away I had a mentor, and then I also found out that she lived in LA, so it was just a beautiful bonus. I exhaled so much anxiety because I knew I had somebody that I could ask anything, I could say anything, I could seek resources, I could just talk about anything. I have been on a thread with 6 other Prader-Willi mommies, I know we're not supposed to do that labeling, but other moms who have children with PWS, I don't know, 10 years. I can say anything, I can ask anything, I can talk about the crazy food seeking or, incidences that we've been through. And we just walk each other through it, and I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. So, I wouldn't be here, like I said, if there weren't key people in the PWS community and even in the mental health community that I've created for myself, which is why I launched We Are Brave in 2017, and I will tell you a little bit about it. We launched with the intent to support caregiving moms, we're very mom-centric, and with the intent to combat isolation, burnout, compassion fatigue, loneliness, by offering community, by offering all types of gatherings, support groups, virtual, in-person. We also put on retreats to give moms a weekend of rest and respite. We don't charge very much. We try to cover most of the cost as an organization, and we also offer scholarships. We also have a podcast called Brave Together, which is just a library of stories and practical resources. So I encourage you to check us out. We've grown into an international group of over 2,100 moms to this day. We represent all the United States in 22 countries, and we have different satellite connection circles in different cities in different states, and even in New Zealand and Australia. So if that strikes you as something you might be interested in, you can see me later. So, like I said, connection and community is critical to surviving amidst chronic hardship, whatever that is. When Kate's depression and anxiety first came to light, I was shocked, I was scared, I was afraid. I was afraid of judgment. You can't really go on Facebook and say, I need a friend, I have a daughter who's suffering from depression and anxiety. There's still stigma. Obviously, I want to protect my daughter, it's her story. I wondered who I was going to talk to. I needed somebody to talk to besides my husband. And I knew I could talk to my sister, who's one of my best friends, and another friend who's a therapist. But what I really needed was a mom who had been through it. I needed a mom who had walked through this journey. And I remembered a mom in We Are Brave who was very, very open about her daughter's struggles. So I reached out to her and I pretended that I was asking for somebody else in We Are Brave. I'm not kidding. So we went on a walk. She was actually local to me. And so we went on a walk and I'm asking her questions, kind of pretending that I'm asking for this other family, and then I just blurted out, it's Kate. It's Kate who's struggling. We're the ones who need help. And I just started crying. It felt so good to get it out. And Stephanie became my person. She's been my person for the last 2.5 years, and I can call her at any time with anything, and she's there for me. The loneliness of loneliness is real, and it's detrimental to our mental health. We must walk with others. This is why summits like this are so critical. You're in safe community with others who get it, who are walking similar paths, similar journeys. It's not a club that any of us ever wanted to be in, but yet there is so much beauty that can come from this as we share our stories and share our experiences together. Self-compassion says, I know you are scared to share what is going on with your family, and yet you need someone to confide in. You need a mentor, a support group. You need to know that you are not alone. You have permission to reach out. Self-compassion gives you permission to reach out. Self-compassion says, I know it feels like your kid might have all the needs or all the problems and struggles, but you deserve help and healing too. There is nothing wrong with you taking that first self-caring step. Self-compassion says, I know it feels like your kid is the only kid in the school, in the neighborhood, in the city, in the state, in the country that is battling this, and yet there are others who are waiting to support you. I know, self-compassion will say, I know it feels like you have no time. You have no time for yourself whatsoever. all your time must go to your family, your work, whatever it is, right? And everybody else. But self-compassion says, no, if you burn out and the wheels fall off your car, so to speak, the whole family video goes down. So please take care. I believe with all my heart that if you are practicing self-compassion, that you will be free or freer of shame, blame, or guilt. You will seek to be connected to yourself, and you will stay grounded, and you will stay grateful. I believe that you will seek meaningful connections with others, and you'll find community and support, and you will engage in soul care practices that sustain your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, relational health for the long haul of caregiving. When we take steps to cultivate a connected, loving presence, it changes our relationship with ourselves. It changes our relationship with the crisis and with the world around us. And like I said, your medical journeys are intense and we require meticulous care. You deserve to take care of your mental health in the same meticulous, loving, attentive way. You are worth it. I want to close with this. We have time for one more story? Yes? A few months ago, I lost my sister Jennifer, suddenly, unexpectedly. It was and is a devastating loss that could absolutely make the wheels of my car come off. And so, I went to yoga the very next day. As I walked into the studio, I wondered if the grief was just all over my swollen face, and I wondered how I would act normal and not just blurt out to anyone and everyone, my sister said. Why did I feel compelled to go in my very sad state? Because yoga keeps me grounded and grateful, and I knew in my soul that this was an incredible, devastating, unexpected loss, and I had to protect myself. I had to do everything to protect my mental health. If I take care of my insides, then my family is taken care of. If I take care of my insides, then we are brain together is taken care of. And it's an ongoing process. If we invest in ourselves, the wheels are so much less likely to loosen or break off. With this grounding confidence, we can cruise down the beautiful and sometimes brutal highway of life with all its twists and turns. I am worth it. You are too.
Thank you, Jessica. Do we have time for questions?
Absolutely.
Any questions?
You are free to comment. Yes.
Hi, my name is Eve Dreyer. I had a foundation advocacy for career therapeutics. And I just wanted to share, one, it was an amazing, presentation. It really spoke to me, it spoke to my heart, my soul. And I'm definitely taking some wonderful learning away. So I would also sort of add, in terms of ways that you can amplify your voices and advocate for yourselves. There are a couple of opportunities that you could, seek. NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disease, has a respite fund. They'll give up to $800 a year, and it can be for a getaway.
Wow.
It can be just, so you can go away to one of Jessica's sessions, somewhere where you can just, spirit away with the girlfriend, some